doing stuff was so far different from the way we operate on a daily basis in this. Remember, this is the trap that we find ourselves in, and I'm going to talk about that trap a little bit later, and the fact that it's a real scientific reality that we face and we need to deal with. So where does that beautiful planet of ours come from? Where does the universe come from in that sense? Because we get told that in the beginning there was nothing, and then suddenly out of this nothing, everything in existence appears. And I have a bit of a problem with that, because that doesn't make any sense. And the scientists call it the Big Bang, and religion and spiritual people calls it God or the Creator. And in that moment and that split second, you walk into a very definite science and God dilemma. And the exciting thing is that when you read between the lines, it's the same bloody thing. It's just a misunderstanding of language and misinterpretation of words, of what is really going on out there. The ones don't want to talk to the others, and the other ones are too scared if they talk to them, they might be put in a box, or they were going to get whipped or hung up or quartered or whatever the hell it is. But there's just a mess out there that's being created by the compartmentalization of knowledge and information and the control system that has created the divide and conquer principle that we all suffer from. And that's the problem. So physics tells us, the scientists today tell us that this Big Bang, out of this nothing, it was nothing, and then suddenly all this stuff just came flying out of this thing called the Big Bang. And let me remind you, it remains a theory. Just like the theory of evolution, it remains a theory. But suddenly, somehow, mainstream academia puts it in as a fact. This is how it happened, and this is how it is, and they teach it at school and university. And if you don't write down it's the Big Bang, which is a cause for everything, you're going to fail, and you're not going to get your degree, and you're not going to get a job, you're not going to have a career, and you're not going to get your golden watch at the end of that career. And that's what this is all about? I don't think so. What's fascinating when you start looking at the universe and everything in it, it starts to look like a giant living organism, and you realize it truly is a giant living organism, living, breathing, existing, filled with consciousness, looking very much like parts of our brain and our anatomy. This is the living universe that we're looking at, and it becomes spectacular. And it's very interesting that we talk about evidence of an expanding universe. The universe, or the multiverse, because there are very few researchers and scientists and astronomers today that still believe there's only one universe. It's now pretty much accepted that we're talking about an infinite number of multiverses here, and that this is an expanding multiverse that keeps growing and growing. And so if that's the case, in standard Newtonian physics and science that gets shoved down our throats, we get told that, well, that's not possible because you can't create or destroy energy. It just always exists. Well, let me take you to that moment of the Big Bang and suddenly realize we have a big problem with that. You can't create or destroy energy. Really? Well, where did all this stuff come from? Well, it comes from the Big Bang. Oh, but where does that come from? Well, it's the Big Bang. Well, it doesn't really explain to me what's happening there, right? So if you keep sticking to this Newtonian physics stuff, you're in really deep trouble, unfortunately. So it's very important that we step out of that kind of way of thinking and realize, until the moment you embrace multidimensional physics and the new frontier of science, new frontier of knowledge that crosses all boundaries of knowledge, that does not compartmentalize information, you're going to continue bumping your head against a brick wall and against a dead end. And I had an interesting experience with some of my PhD friends at universities in South Africa, mathematicians and scientists and so forth, who always, my friend Peter phones me, he's got 4 PhDs in science, chemistry, physics, and whatever, mathematics. And every time he phones me with new discoveries, and he says, oh, Michael, I think I've cracked the anti-gravity thing. And I say, wow, it's amazing, tell me. And he starts explaining this whole long, big formula to me, and I stopped him the last time I spoke to him. I said, Peter, do you ever incorporate sacred geometry into your calculations? And he said, no, I haven't. And I go, you know what, I've got a feeling that until you do that, and you start incorporating the sacred geometric ratios into these formulas that you're trying to crack, you're not going to make any progress. And there was a silence on the phone, and he said, I think you're right. And I haven't spoken to him since. I don't know if he, if he's in another dimension or something. So the problem is with this expanding multiverse that we find ourselves in, according to basic normal physics, there's got to be, someone blowing it up, because you can't have something expanding while without something contracting, and clearly there's no evidence for that going on. And this is a huge, interesting problem, because we find that the laws of Newtonian physics break down at the quantum level, and things are not as they seem. And this becomes the most exciting part of this journey of discovery, where we start recognizing the source of this advanced technology that we keep talking about. This ancient advanced technology keeps coming back to the source of all things. It's not some magical thing that we find that if we don't understand those fundamental principles that are far removed from what we've been taught in science and physics, we will never understand this advanced ancient technology. And this is where it gets very, very exciting, because we got to start understanding that we are part of this infinite fractal of energies and multiplication of creation through consciousness, and the multidimensional physics that we're starting to read about and talk about and coming to grips with through getting closer to understanding spirituality and consciousness is a very, very exciting journey. So ancient technology is about understanding the source code. Then we can start making sense of what this ancient technology is all about. And my source code tells me that it's all to do with sound and resonance, because that's what all ancient cultures talk about. You cannot get away from that. It is not possible to try and find something else, because they'll always bring you back to everything in creation comes from the source of sound and resonance, when the Creator brought everything forth. And it's this prime resonance frequency that holds everything in creation together in this perfect harmony, so it exists in coherence and not dissonance, because this is the coherent principle of everything existing in harmony. And in there lies a very important lesson for us as human beings, how to coexist in harmony, not in dissonance, in coherent, resonant harmony. That's what this is ultimately all about. And in there then lies the advanced technology of our brain to comprehend this and actually make this a reality for ourselves. And as I showed you yesterday, or whenever it was, the day before, I believe that this is where Star Trek gets this philosophy of the prime directive from, because you can't go against this prime resonance frequency. It's not going to happen. Okay? You're going to be bumping your head against the wall, and eventually it'll cause your own demise. And for those people that believe that there are lots of advanced beings down here trying to help humanity from other dimensions and so forth, which there seems to be some very interesting evidence for as well, I do believe that some of them are actually here because they may realize that they breached the prime directive with what happened here on Earth. That they created a species which has been kept dumbed down, not allowed to expand and grow in their own consciousness, to take their own course in growth in consciousness, to reunite with Source, and this species is being kept dumbed down and prevented from growing in consciousness, and that would be called a breach of the prime directive. So if you do that, you're causing some serious trouble for yourself, because that echoes back onto you as a species, whoever you are, and starts to resonate in dissonance with you as a species or a being. So just to remind you that this resonance and dimensions have got some very interesting numbers and principles around it. 3 is the so-called Holy Trinity. Most of us have come across this. So there's a very interesting example in music, and music is sound. So you can explain this with sound very easily. Because when you play music, it's only when you add the third note to the first 2 notes, you complete the chord. And you complete the beautiful harmonious chord. Until then, it's not a chord. And you don't get the same effect from it. So when you add the third note to it, complete the Holy Trinity of sound, you create your first complete chord, and those chords can reduce you to tears. The music that we hear in movies can make you scared, it can reduce you to tears, it can make you emotional, it can make you excited, it can do all kinds of things with music, and you start to realize how just by simply manipulating, by expanding the third or adding the minor third or adding the seventh or the major or a flattened ninth and all these things to the musical chord structures, you realize how you can very effectively manipulate people's emotions. It's all to do with sound and frequency and resonance. It's spectacular. 7 and 8 are very important numbers because that completes the resonant harmonic octave. 7, the 7th note is the 8th note from the source, and the 8th note is the octave above the 7th note in front of it. And that completes the octave. And in there lies a very interesting harmonic resonance principle in understanding advanced technology, because when we get to the monoatomic gold and what that actually does in terms of advanced technology and how that can be used, you start to realize that 7 hides 8. If you look at a star tetrahedron or a hexagon, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just one is a 2D version of the other. And you get, if you look at a hexagon, 7 and 8 are actually the dot in the middle. The one hides the other. If you twist it slightly sideways, you'll see 7 and 8 and completing the cube inside the circle or the sphere. So just imagine that in your mind. So 7 hides 8. And in there you actually can see, encoded in there is the harmonic resonant principle. For those of you that know music will know what I'm talking about. If you do not have a very well-trained ear in music, if you play the middle C on a piano and you play the C above it, the octave, you close your eyes, you will not know whether you're playing 2 notes or 1 note or 3 notes. It sounds like 1 note. So what I'm telling you is the 7th frequency hides the 8th one, either below it or above it. And so we start seeing how even visually we get very important information about this resonance thing, which is a tool to use in advanced technology, if you understand it. 12 and 13 is just a higher level version of the 7 and 8. Same thing. Because you add the 5 black notes, the 5 bad notes, the on the piano, right? And then 22/7 approximates pi. It'll never get there, but it's close enough to make us realize that something very important is encoded in that ratio. And you start to realize that this is all just a few very important lessons in understanding why the universe rings like a bell and vibrates in perfect, coherent harmony. And this understanding, the fact that our bodies do this, gives us the very clear indication that we resonate with the universe. We are an infinite fractal of this creation. We are it. We resonate in perfect harmony with everything in creation, and if we don't, then we become diseased and become dis-ease, and that's where these problems come into our lives. So we can connect into the morphogenetic field. And if you have worked or listened to William Brown's presentation on genetics and all that, you'll understand a lot more about that. It's a spectacular lot of information there about the morphogenetic field, the resonance behind everything, and because everything is connected. You cannot separate anything from everything else, and that's the problem we face today, that everything in our lives is compartmentalized. We've become so separated and so segregated on every level that we live in apartments, you know. It's encoded in the wording that's used in every language. And you start realizing that because of this resonance that's encoded in us, because we are infinite fractals of this resonant field and the prime direct of prime creation, we should be able to feel and sense everything. Understand, we all have a sphere of influence around us. You know, we use the words. I walked into a room, there was such a bad vibe in the room. Vibration, bad vibe. You know, and so we use this in our language, and we don't necessarily always realize what it is that we're saying. So, and one of the great bits of research that Greg Braden made famous and well known is the fact that the measurements and the science that was done on the heart compared to the brain actually shows that your heart is as much as 5,000 times stronger. The frequencies of your heart and the effect of your heart is up to 5,000 times, if not more, stronger than the brain, showing you that the source of your heartbeat. In fact, if you just think about this, if you just think about this, if your heart is the thing that keeps pumping, right, and it's a frequency, 72 beats a minute or whatever it is, right? It depends on how fit you are. Every time you feel your heart beat, you can actually feel your connectedness to Source. That's what it is. It reminds you that you're a divine being connected to Source every time you hear your heart beat. So do that next time you feel depressed or want to slit your wrists. Don't do that. Just feel your heart. Know that you're connected to everything around you. It's a spectacular realization. So let's get back to this advanced technology, because I truly believe that sound and resonance are at the foundation of all knowledge and all advanced technology. And if sound is a primordial source of all things, therefore we should be able to do everything with sound, especially advanced technology, blowing people up, blowing planets up, killing everyone. But that's not really what we want to do, is it? We want to use it for something much better than that. But unfortunately, if you look around what's been happening in the secret government organizations and the black ops projects, that's what they seem to have been doing. Like I mentioned previously, there's one individual at this event who should be a speaker and he's not, who has done all this stuff, who's developed sound technology to manifest things out of thin air, who's developed technology to boil water with sound, who's developed sound and resonant tools and weapons to fry people, not just on the planet, but on the moon. And this is all done in fun and jest, because it becomes like a game to these scientists when they're doing it, not realizing that they're actually developing really bad things. So let's just go through some of these things. My favorite subject: sound levitates, boils water, it creates light, it creates DNA. Sound heals and destroys pathogens. Sound moves beyond the speed of light. It is sometimes referred to as hypersound or Caesar technology. Sound makes things invisible, energizes water and the air we breathe, and it's the precursor to electromagnetism. Remember, God said, "Let there be light." So sound first, light next. Out of that, you get everything manifesting in this electromagnetic universe that we find ourselves in. And this was spectacularly demonstrated in 2005 at the Middle Tennessee State University, when two high school students and two undergraduates did some experiments, and they showed that sound can move beyond the speed of light. And this was published in the American Institute of Physics. This should have made it on the bloody news all over the world. No, it's too dangerous. Can't tell people this. It'll give them too many ideas. And this is how we're being controlled and compartmentalized. So let's just go through this one here. Most of you are familiar with this. Sound manifesting physical form. But just to remind ourselves, I can't get enough of it, and hopefully you can't too. Come on, play. Yeah, I'm going to have to hum it for you. No, okay, well, obviously this one is not going to work, but you've seen all this. This is why I was up all night. Then to show you how your human voice, what a powerful tool we have in our throats here, the human voice, the voice box. It's truly a creation tool, because we can make so many, virtually infinite number of sounds and frequencies with our throats and our mouths and our tongues and our voice and our voices, is an indicator that we should be able to create these infinite things, just manifest by speaking, what wizards used to do and you used to be able to do until that knowledge was removed. So this is the Cymoscope, John Stuart Reid and his partners, and just a spectacular example of how sound, our voices can manifest. Can you see it? No, hold on, it'll come up. Every sound frequency gives you a very unique and specific. Imagine this in 3D. And here's one of those bubbles captured in a photograph, and the cross-section of that clearly indicates that the religious symbols were inspired by the sound thing. You've seen this before. There's your beautiful cross in a circle, which also tells us that the Native American medicine men understood the sound healing property, because the cross in a circle, the medicine wheel, is really just a cross in a circle, telling us that they understood that sound was a healer. Sound can do everything. And this brings us to sound as a tool of technology. And once again, the point of departure here is healing. In 1931, Royal Raymond Rife used sound as an advanced technological tool to cure all disease. Sound and resonance, you know all this. What happened to him? Removed from the system. Prime resonance, that's what this is all about. Prime resonance frequency, because every cell in your body, just like everything else in creation, has its own prime resonance frequency. And he found that cancer cells, because this was the experiment he did, responded really badly to certain sound and resonance frequencies. And he could morph them and turn normal cells into cancerous cells by exposing them to certain frequencies, and then bring them back, all under his special microscopes. Those amazing microscopes that he created. There was the first microscope that could actually see living cells under a microscope. Until then, and I believe even today, it is not that easy to do. And that was all removed from the knowledge pool of the legacy for humanity. So you can see how the small cells resonate at a higher frequency, and the larger the organ becomes, the lower the frequency that it resonates at. What I find interesting is here that this particular research shows that the human body resonates at between 7 and 10 hertz, which is very close, or in that range between the Schumann resonance, the resonance of planet Earth. And that tells us that we should be resonating at the same frequency as Mother Earth. In there is the information encoded in there. If we don't resonate in harmony with Mother Earth, we are in dis-ease and we get sick. It's interesting that neurons that transfer information in our bodies do this via sound frequencies, and they found that there's 7 primary sound frequencies at which these neurons transmit this information. So we talk about advanced technology. This is advanced technology right in our bodies, people, all to do with sound and resonance, the source principle. And here's my favorite guy, Peter Davey. I speak about him all the time. That took boiling water with sound to the grave. But as I mentioned before, I met a guy in Sydney just last week or 10 days ago, and he showed me he developed the same device, and he boils water with it. So we're going to be working on that when I leave the USA, to try and get that to the whole world and allow people to use this to create free electricity for us, because I think this energy thing is a big problem, and I've had my own experience with it, as I mentioned before, and I've spoken to various other people that work in the free energy industry. The moment you start working on free alternative energy, something weird starts to happen. People start losing their mind, they go bonkers, or they run off somewhere, or weird things happen. It's like we're not ready to receive really advanced source of free energy. And I believe that boiling water with sound is like a small gradual step towards higher consciousness, which will liberate people from the electrical enslavement, the energy enslavement. Because, right now we're creating electricity with boiling water, using the steam to drive the turbines. So we're not going to move away. We can still use the power plants on Earth today. Nothing has to change. We just replace the coal burning with using these devices to boil the water. So it's not a huge shift in our consciousness, but it's a large leap in understanding that we can achieve miracles with technology, advanced technology. So here's poor Professor Williamson, who's got no bloody clue what's going on, but he's the expert, right? And Peter Davey thinks that he's invented something to make a cup of tea, and this is how they talk about it on the news. Not a device that can give the world free electricity. That's the amazing thing. It boggles the mind, That's how blind we are sometimes. I've shown you this already, the acoustic levitation, so I'm not going to show this to you again, but this is David Deake's famous acoustic levitation chamber. You can see this on the internet. I'm going to show you another one that I haven't shown you yet. This is a new levitation thing that recently made its appearance. Only word of caution here is that this is not how you're going to move 10 or 20 ton block stones or 300 ton block stones. This is just capturing tiny little objects, as you can see, tiny objects within two standing waves, creating pressure through the molecules in the air. So that's how they manipulate this. But at least it gives you an idea how sound can move and manipulate things. And now from there, we can expand our minds. Because the ancients didn't use this. They used what we would refer to as Caesar technology or hypersound. And one other guy who used this advanced technology already in 1888, who should have changed the world as we know it, is John Keely. One of my heroes, actually, and very, very badly forgotten. He lived in Philadelphia. All his stuff was bought and removed from the mainframe when he died. And he was turned out to be a charlatan and a liar who fabricated information, because that's what they do to people that make great discoveries. Well, John Keely used sound primarily, and he would crush giant blocks of stone into the finest powder in a few minutes, which is virtually impossible in today's technology. I know from growing up on the mines, what they do, how they have to, when they extract the ore out of the ground on the gold mines and the platinum mines, and they take these big chunks of rock and they put them in these huge steel drums filled with these metal balls, and then these drums rotate for hours for them to crush the ore into a fine powder. That's how primitive the mining industry is today still. And John Keely changed that completely by using sound to crush giant stones. He drilled absolute precise holes with precise aperture and depth into rock with sound frequency. He levitated stone and metal balls. And in that levitation, which is, by the way, very well documented by a group of journalists in his laboratory, and they wrote about this in 1888 or around that period. And all that information was very conveniently removed. What is fascinating about this is that one of the things that he said, that to be able to levitate things with sound, the source of the sound has to be calibrated to your body's energy. And you'll see how important that information is when we get to Egypt. I think one of the most important discoveries to do with advanced technology and sound is Luc Montagnier, who gave us free DNA, spontaneous DNA generation. Now, just if you think about this, if you can spontaneously generate DNA with sound, that means you've created the code for physical form, life, and possibly consciousness. Which means, just think about this process of deduction here, that if you can generate DNA with sound, that means you should be able to generate anything with sound. Anything. If you can make DNA. And this is the kind of stuff we got to start thinking about. Everything is possible. Once you start using resonance, sound, harmonics, everything and anything is possible. Look at this. Even a photograph of an electron shows us the coherence in what's supposed to be a picture of an electron. This is a picture of a light beam moving through an electron. You can see the coherence inside the so-called structure of the electron. And so it goes. Advanced technology, the magnetron that we use today uses sound. It's called a resonant cavity magnetron. Resonance, space, sound inside a space that creates huge amounts of energy. How much energy? So much energy that magnetrons are used to cut with laser beams, to cut metal in a split second. Now, if this is not advanced technology using sound, I don't know what else we're going to look at for advanced technology. Sound creates light. Sound creates light. Absolutely. God said, let there be light. Here's an experiment that many people have done already, even with Christmas lights on their trees, that when you take a big speaker and you attach it to a little LED light and you put the speaker in a very noisy area, it reverses the process. It vibrates the coil and it sends the energy back and it lights up the little light. So sound creates light. God said, let there be light. There you got a perfect example. And then we get to Daniel Nunes in New York, Daniel Erica Nunes, who make these vortex coils, these copper vortex coils. And Daniel, by putting sound into the center of his vortex coil, generates so much energy that he converts gas into plasma. That is starting to get towards really understanding advanced technology that we can put to some really interesting use. Using vortex coils and sound frequencies, generating plasma. This is very exciting. And then something I showed you before, which I just want to touch upon again, utilizing sound as a source of energy for creating perpetual motion devices. This is the work of Christian Lange, a German scientist, who developed this wind turbine that moves from the sound of the wind that creates a resonance as the sound goes into the turbine. When it starts to resonate, the resonance starts to turn the turbine, and that's it. Once the resonance turns, it becomes a perpetual motion device and generates energy. Now, it just so happens that his device looks like a pair of lungs. So when he showed me his device, the way it looks, I freaked out. I couldn't believe it. And I emailed him a picture of lungs, and he'd never seen a picture of lungs, and he was really surprised that his device looked like a picture of lungs. But what strikes me is that what actually happens in this process, it seems that as the air goes into the device, it speeds up until it reaches hypersound. And when it reaches hypersound, it becomes a dangerous tool, an advanced technological device. And that's what really happens in our lungs as well. And that's what I believe oxygenates or energizes the oxygen that we breathe in, that then energizes our blood, from which we get our energy. It's got nothing to do with whatever else we are taught at school and at university. It's really about the energizing of the oxygen in the lungs. And then when you start seeing the alveoli inside the lungs, by the time the air and the sound reaches your alveoli, it is so charged that it does magic. And the interesting thing is that the alveoli actually looks like hexagonal cells. And this is where I started to comparing the stone circles in South Africa. If you look at, now you start comparing, look at this image and this previous image of the magnetron. Sorry, there's the magnetron. Nice flower-shaped structure, right? And then here we have the lungs and the alveoli that are hexagonal-shaped cells. Well, look at this. A flower-shaped magnetron right next to connected by these channels, connected to the bottom of it, hexagonal cluster of hexagonal structures. And this is what started making me believe and go a lot deeper into understanding how these ancients used sound and resonance into possibly generating an atmosphere. And this starts to get really interesting, because these are certainly not cattle kraal. They're not dwellings. These are highly advanced technological devices that we're only starting to understand by step understanding the source code, the source of all things being resonance. And here it is right in front of our eyes, not just one of them, thousands and thousands of them. So whatever these guys were doing, they were using the understanding of the sound and source code principles to do all this weird stuff that we're still trying to figure out what the hell they were doing. Here's another example. See those hexagonal structures to the left? Cluster of them. And then this channel that runs away from it. Obviously, these are badly destroyed, badly eroded. You can hardly see them, but only from aerial photographs. If you go and walk among them, I've walked among some of these, and it's very confusing, because you stand on these walls, and there are no doors and entrances, so you've got to climb onto these walls, and they're normally about this high, and then you stand there and you look out at these things and you go, well, what the hell's going on here? What is this for? It doesn't make any sense until you start seeing some of the resemblances to other anatomical features and structures that make sense. This one here looks like a cross-section of the tissue in the lungs. It's virtually identical to the histology of the lungs. And there's more of it here. And this really, for me personally, gets very, very exciting, because I believe we started to knock on the door of understanding the so-called advanced technology of the ancients. I believe that this was used for somehow generating an atmosphere or generating air or oxygen or whatever they were doing with it. And then we get to the latest discovery, how sound is used as a cloak of invisibility. They call it the sound bottle, that makes things disappear and makes it invisible. And that gets even more exciting because they've even turned it into a plastic pyramid, and this plastic pyramid, when exposed to certain sound frequencies, disappears from sight and everything below it. So if you put the plastic pyramid up there and you put sound frequencies on it, whatever you put underneath it will disappear. With the pyramid, you will not see it. So this is just insane stuff. This is brand new research. I mean, they've just put this out there about 3 days ago on the news. I guess they've been working with this for quite a while already before they put it out. So, and what I found interesting is that that structure that you see, that pyramid there, that they made out of plastic, really looks very close to, for comfort, to Asian building techniques. And you go, okay, what were these guys, why were they building their buildings like this? Because you have to go to a lot of trouble to build buildings like this, right? It's not easy to build them. Were they hiding something underneath? And maybe that's exactly what it was. That was a cloak of invisibility for whatever stuff they were doing. They didn't want the peasants to see. You can't see, they let the peasants see creatures coming in and out of the ground and things disappearing into underground tunnels and all that. So we built these weird structures that we can do anything and nobody will know about it. So sound is the ultimate source of free energy. And if this doesn't make your mind wander into all areas of possibility, if sound is the ultimate source of free energy, then we can use it for everything and anything. And I've covered this already, that humanity was taken control of by the use of cone-shaped tools. And these cone-shaped tools made me call it the ice cream cone phenomenon, because it is really spectacular when you start to recognize it. And one of the key moments was realizing that this technology was used by Ed Leeds-Cullen in building Coral Castle. How you can manipulate 5-ton or 10-ton blocks of coral, how you can cut them so precisely. He certainly didn't do that with a handsaw. Just think about getting a big lump of coral and cutting it so precisely into these shapes that he used at Coral Castle. If this guy didn't have advanced technology, then it would not have been possible for him to do this. And by process of elimination and deduction, realizing that he did this, or hearing that he did this with ice cream cones in his hands, gives us a very clear indication that cone-shaped tools are at the source and at the center of this recurring mystery of advanced technology in ancient times. And as I said, I've been finding these cone-shaped tools everywhere around South Africa, and iron mines in England, cone-shaped tools in Egypt. And to remind you that the Native American medicine men, when they perform their special ceremonies in the kivas, especially, bang together cone-shaped tools to make a sound. That's why they do that. And the conical tower in Great Zimbabwe is a giant cone. And even in Australia, you get cone-shaped tools. And then these ones in the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, California, which tell us that these cone-shaped tools commemorate the building of the temples in Sumer, and specifically one of them refers to the temple of Inanna. And that takes us to a deeper understanding of the rods and cones in our eyes, that we could possibly have supernatural abilities like Superman because the cones in our eyes. And that brings us back to these bloody stone circles in South Africa, because therein lies a real deeper understanding of this technology. What I shared with you yesterday without the electricity is just something that I kept in here just to remind you, because the question is, what happened to these more than 10 million stone circles, stone structures without doors and entrances, all connected by channels, sitting inside a large spider's web effect of terraces that were apparently growing food for millions of people. What is this all about? The question is, what happened to these people? And this is one of those great examples of a picture that you snap just accidentally, because we were flying in a helicopter at the right time of the day, because at the wrong time of the day you'll never see this. And you see these mountains, vast areas of mountains covered with these ruins, and you can see the sediment of sand and soil that covers them. They lie hidden beneath the sand and soil. So in there lies the clue what happened here. Something covered them with sand and soil. And that clue we find in these two Sumerian texts, which I mentioned to you. These kings lists that talk about these kings that lived for more than 220,000 years. And clearly they weren't human, these guys. And then it tells us at the bottom there, then the flood swept over. So it seems that it was the so-called biblical flood that was actually the cause of the destruction of this vast civilization. The flood swept over at the bottom there. Then the flood came, and you can see another picture of a large area of flat areas running up into mountains. So this activity in South Africa is all about the gold. We've assumed this, and it's important to recognize that not only in South Africa but around the world, this gold thing is critical to understanding of how it was used for exploitation, for control of humanity, and also as a technological device, because this gold plays a very important part in manipulating reality. It is a technological device. But we just don't know it. We think of gold as, something you trade on the stock market. But you never get to see that gold. You just buy certificates, so you don't actually even know if the gold exists. So it's a bloody illusion in the end, isn't it? So it's interesting to note that all ancient cultures, wherever you go, always tell you, when the Spaniards arrived here in the Americas and they asked, when they found some of the people had so much gold, and they asked them, where does this gold come from? They said, gold belongs to the gods. This is the standard answer of the ancient civilizations. And this has never changed. And I think the gold still belongs to the gods. It has never belonged to us. And this is why they allow us to have drink. Oh, look at this gold. I've got this beautiful golden bracelet. Isn't it beautiful? And this is what we do to it. We don't understand what it's about. In Genesis 2, we got a spectacular example that it was not human obsession with gold, but it's actually the obsession of the gods. Because here's the narrator talking, and we have to assume that the narrator is the voice of God, not just somebody making stuff up. So the narrator tells us that in Genesis 2, this is before Eve was created. Adam was still alone on planet Earth. And already we see the obsession of gold with the gods, with the Elohim. And it says that the land of Havilah, there's gold, the land is good, the water is good, and there is gold, buddy. And then that takes us to one of the most spectacular instructions of using gold in human history, and that's the Ark of the Covenant. Possibly the most advanced bit of technology that we have faced in biblical times. All you got to do is read the Bible, and you'll see that these amazing tricks that you could do with this box. But first you had to make it this big and that big, and you have to cover it with gold this thick and that thick, and it had to be this, and the cherubim over there. And then it tells Moses, sit between the cherubs on top of the Ark of the Covenant, and I will talk to you and give you instructions as to what to tell the Israelites. Really? Wow. You're just giving away the game here. Yeah. So clearly it was a communication device as well. So advanced technology, communication device, we're starting to get a very interesting idea. And then the golden surprise, the golden calf. What happened when Moses came down from the mountain? He took the golden calf, he burnt it in the fire. He didn't turn it into molten gold, he turned it into white powder. What did he do with his white powder? He put it in the water and made the Israelites drink it. There are actually two separate accounts of this event, and they differ slightly. But this is where we start to realize this is the golden surprise, and this has got nothing to do. And the question was yesterday, what's the gold all about? You smart people, you know what it's all about. But we got to remind ourselves of what it's about, to understand that we're dealing with advanced knowledge and advanced technology. All of this stuff works together, people. You can't separate any of this from anything else. It's only when you start throwing it together, you start to get a real sense of what these guys were up to, and what they really knew and understood, how to apply this in technology. So, monoatomic state, ORMS, it's called ORMUS, all kinds of interesting things. White powder reform, non-metallic, completely non-metallic. This white powder of monoatomic gold. Remember, why is it monoatomic? Most people still don't understand this, because the gold atom on its own is actually Au, aurum, Au2. So it's two atoms of gold that combine, that make up gold, not a single atom. So if you can prevent that combination of the two golden atoms to create gold, the way the yellow gold, it remains monoatomic. And boy, in there lies some very interesting stuff. When you start dealing with monoatomic elements, like hydrogen, for example, which is a monoatomic element as well, you start getting some interesting things happen. And this is why there seems to be this obsession with hydrogen for an alternative source of electricity or energy. And I think we're going completely down the wrong rabbit hole because we're missing the point here. The thing with monoatomic gold is so you prevent the two atoms from combining, and if you somehow manage to keep them monoatomic, you get this white fluffy powder. It doesn't look like shiny yellow gold at all. And everything changes. It has no metallic properties at all. It's a white fluffy powder. And this is the spectacular work done by David Hudson, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And I had the pleasure of meeting David on several occasions. He came to South Africa to do a presentation there as well at our conference. So I've learned a great deal from David, not only from his presentation, but what he shared with me, what he's done with the MIT research and why they couldn't publish the information. Because basically the standard scientific protocol is that if you can't explain it, you can't publish a paper on it. And that was it. They couldn't explain what they were observing, therefore they couldn't publish a paper on it. That's simple. That cannot be peer-reviewed, because no one has got the knowledge and the ability to peer review your paper. So you can't write about it. And this is how we suppress knowledge and information. This whole idea of peer review is the most evil thing that has actually befallen humanity, because it just, keeps promoting BS. And this next book keeps citing some other asshole who wrote about something he didn't understand about. But that now becomes promoted as fact and law and actual stuff that happened because it was written by some professor with a PhD. And all the students keep citing that professor because otherwise they're not going to pass and not get their PhDs. So this is how peer review documents make it into fame and whatever happens to them. Yeah, it's spectacular. That's our education system, right? So remember that you probably know already that this monoatomic gold acts as a superconductor. It transfers information immediately. No spooky action at a distance. Coherence, that's what happens. It emits this weird single frequency of light. It heals faulty cells and restores DNA, apparently. It has anti-gravity properties, and this is very important information here, because when David says when they had this white fluffy powder in this inert tube of gas in the lab, and he brought his hand under it, and the fluffy powder was on a little metal plate or some sort of plate inside there, like a little pile of fluffy powder. When he brought his hand under it, the pile of powder lifted up and started to float. It moved away from his hand. They tried it with magnets, they tried it with all kinds of other things. It didn't move. But the moment you used the human hand, the fluffy powder lifted up, responded to human touch and nothing else that they tried. They even tried to put an electrical charge to it and nothing happened. And this is really important, because that tells us that we have monoatomic elements in our bodies, because it repels the monoatomic form of gold inside the tube. So we actually already possess monoatomic elements and probably monoatomic gold. It is also important to know, and I only learned this from a scientist in Boulder, Colorado last October, that gold is the only of the entire group of elements, and the platinum group of elements, the only one that fluxes at body temperature. So it can be utilized by your body and absorbed. And this is why it's gold and monoatomic gold, and not monoatomic platinum or monoatomic silver, monoatomic gold that is so important in ancient human history. This gets us to truly understanding advanced knowledge and advanced technology of the ancients.